Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. Star Trek Next Gen, I did read a bunch of these. I also read several of the Star Wars ones, but I haven't yet really had the opportunity to track them down because it's been so many years. I don't actually recall, any of the titles or authors of the Star Wars ones I read, so that'll happen if and when it happens. But in the meantime, I actually had this on my shelf. So, Chains of Command by Bill McCay and Eloise Flood. Um, there's a lot of stuff in this about racism and misunderstanding and invasions and long-term whatnot. What's really great about these books, for all that these are as much canon as fan fiction ever is, that is not really much at all, is that in a book you can have alien species that fundamentally cannot be played by humans. And that's the thing is, you have that happening in things like Star Wars Clone Wars where it's a cartoon. And so you can do whatever you like with it. But it's one of the things that we certainly could not have done back in 1992, especially with the kind of budget that, while Star Trek Next Gen had a significantly bigger budget than the original Trek did, it still didn't have infinite monies the way some things do these days. And if you want to have an actual physical actor on screen acting, you need to have a character that, a human being can sort of fit into and do the role of. Doing a Jabba the Hutt is an incredible amount of trouble. Doing an alien species that is not human-shaped is incredible amounts of trouble because it's hard to make it emote. It's hard to make it into a person rather than just some sort of a thing on stage, on screen. It's something that I saw once in passing in an interview about Babylon 5, and I don't watch interviews, so when I say I saw it in an interview, that means that I was channel flipping and tripped over something wholly by accident, because I don't actually watch interviews. And one of the people involved in Babylon 5 had commented that it's always very, very important for you to still be able to see an actor's eyes because eyes are so important to acting. And that's the thing. That's why, people like to talk about, if you wander into the fan fiction zone, it's usually, heavily implied or discussed or what have you that, that the Emperor was human-centric or what have you. And I assume that the canon of that has been built up in books and comic books and other extraneous things. But what's really interesting is the reason why we have so many human-centric things in sci-fi is because our actors are all human, and it's a heck of a lot easier to make a human your lead character than it is to make an alien, because when you make an alien your lead character, you have to put on all the makeup. When you talk about Quark on Deep Space Nine, Armin Shimmerman said that it took them something like 5 hours or some ridiculous amount of time to get all of that makeup on him to play Quark. When you do that kind of stuff, it takes a huge amount of time to do it. You have to put on all of that makeup, you have to put on all of the latex, you have to build everything up, you have to, do the things to make it look like it is actually a part of a person and not just something stuck to their forehead, and so on and so forth. And so this novel is one of those things. It's one of the great advantages to doing science fiction in a novel form is you can say, as they do in this novel, that you have an intelligent bird species represented and you can just describe them and how they look, and you are not faced with the problem that you have in live action sci-fi, that if you want to do that, you have to either have crazy practical effects or you have to have CGI effects. And practical effects are a problem because the wires have to be hidden and the, things moving arms around have to go somewhere. And when you do CGI is a great, great invention for film. CGI is what made Jurassic Park possible. CGI has made all sorts of things possible that were not possible before, but so much of CGI still doesn't look like it's actually there. So much of it still looks like this thing that you're looking at is in some kind of in-between, not entirely real space. It's why practical effects, despite all of the difficulties of them, in some ways still will always beat out CGI, because if you show a thing that's actually in the room with somebody, it looks like it's actually there. So no matter how fake the shark in Jaws looks, it's an actual physical thing that is in the same space as the actors. And that adds a weight of realism to it that is missing when you have a purely CGI creature. So, it's one of the things that I enjoy about this book, just because you're getting to have some of that, exploration of new species with something that is not so wholly alien as the crystalline entity or the tar pool that ate Tasha Yar, but is nonetheless a wholly non-human entity. It's a person, but it's a person that's not a human-shaped person. Because ultimately, when you're talking about Romulans, when you're talking about Cardassians, when you're talking about Klingons or Ferengi or Bajorans or, any other species that you can come up with off the top of your head, these are played by human actors, and so they are fundamentally human-shaped. Simply because it's easier to do that, and it's less trouble. So the story of this is that you had some 300 or however many hundred years ago, bunch of people, and they are fleeing the last of the great world wars on Earth. And because we know that there are cataclysms in Earth's history in Star Trek, and they fled and accidentally stumbled into a wormhole and came popping out in this planet. And when they came popping out on that planet, they were desperately trying to survive. And then this alien race, called the Sri Tsitsk, arrived and saw them and said, this is some kind of weird hive mind creatures, and promptly enslaved them. And there's a lot of discussion of slavery and, the depersonalization of the people who get enslaved. The standard ways that you justify slavery. That is, these people aren't actual people. They're like only things that kind of look like people, but they're not real people, so we're going to use them for work because they're not real people. That's how you justify it. And the Tsetsk, it's a lot easier to justify it when you're talking about an alien species. But they enslaved the humans, and for a couple hundred years, the humans, have been sort of trying to deal with this. And then the Enterprise comes along. And that's the thing at the start of this book. Well, technically this book starts with a brand new ensign on an away mission, and everybody on the away mission is doing a thing that they never do on the show, and that is wearing environmental protection suits, which they don't do on the show because it's a lot of trouble and, highly problematic to constantly have everybody wearing those because it makes acting hard. It's the same reason people don't wear that on CSI. It's nothing. It's to do with, let's not be accurate, let's make this a good drama. But anyway, so they're wearing them, and one of them cracks it open, and she dies a horrible, horrible death, because there's a reason why you wear environmental suits on alien planets. Anyways, so the Enterprise stumbles across these enslaved humans, and the appearance of free humans sparks a revolution, and the humans on that planet revolt. The problem is that they're kind of like a penal colony. There is one Tsetsk who is on the planet, some humans who are kind of intermediate overseers, as they are entitled, and, a bunch of strictly men. And that's because, of course, they are attempting to control things by saying, well, we keep the two breeding populations apart so that they can't, breed a lot and take over, because if they do revolt and we can't take over, well, it'll last one generation and then they'll be gone because they won't have the ability to have any more children. The great advantage to having separated breeding populations. Anyways, so the Enterprise winds up tangled with this because these are humans. And so they deserve to have the right to be part of the Federation, but they've been separated for long enough. They're really a separate cultural group. And so it's a very awkward position for the Enterprise to be in, even more so because these former slaves, of course, they just want to murderize all the Tsetsk for having enslaved them, which is fine, except committing genocide on another species, even if that species has, enslaved you, is perhaps not necessarily the most moral response. And it becomes even more complicated when you discover that, for example, the Tsetsk, who is supposed to be in charge of things, is a reformer, is trying to bring an end to slavery, and is trying to push for a new agenda for her people. Meaning, you've got this highly, highly technologically advanced society that could absolutely crush the human uprising. If you kill the one who's on your side, you've shot yourself in the foot. The problem is that the humans on this planet are so angry and so caught up in this that they miss that they may shoot themselves in the foot if they don't work with her. And there's a whole... And what's interesting, of course, is that you've got Commander Riker and Beverly Crusher and a human guy who is kind of a bridge between two worlds named Vosted, I assume, at least, because I don't know who else that guy would be. I also don't know why he's dressed like that, but whatever. It's interesting because Beverly Crusher is brought front and center because she sort of bonds with this 13-year-old boy who reminds her of Wesley, because this boy is sort of a very, very bright child who's on the side of the rebellion and stuff. And he winds up getting somewhat victimized by the determination of the rebellion to do whatever they think is necessary. And, you have a lot of bonding about that, but Beverly and Lauren aren't really key so much as human interest. And Riker spends a certain amount of time in this book repeatedly angsting over decisions you have to make as a commander. But the key characters in this book, Drak the Tsetsk and Vosted, who, okay, he's on the cover, and Koban, who is the leader of the rebellion, they're not on the cover, and also, Picard and Troy, who are kind of the ones who manage to work things out in the end. Well, in particular, Picard manages to work things out in the end to save them all, and he's not on the cover. So it's interesting. Also, this Commander Riker must either give up the Enterprise or sacrifice his captain's life. It's not a wholly accurate blurb. Anyways, I'm out of time, so that's everything, and I'll see you all next week.